Hi friends, welcome to class 8 of International NGOs, and we have a very timely discussion here on global activism and how international NGOs play a part in this process. And just with the news coming in today of the US pulling out from the Paris Climate Accord, this is going to be a hot button issue for the next couple of months or maybe even years. So while we are at it, I think this is a good opportunity for us to hear carefully at what's going on in this space and also pay attention to several NGOs, Greenpeace, Climate Action Network, and a couple of others who are doing incredible work in this space. So at the end of this today's session, hopefully you'll be able to understand the role of INGOs in international negotiations and also appreciate the key role that they play as intermediaries between the nation state and the international community at large. Now, the reading by Raustiala might feel a little dated, but I assure you that the concepts and the ideas that are presented there are very relevant, and some empirical data might be old, but I think the article is as relevant today as it was written in 1997. So don't worry about how old it is, but focus rather on the concepts and the ideas that they have proposed. While we are at it, I'd like you to make a table on a piece of paper and write down the positive and negative roles that NGOs, INGOs specifically, have played in the realm of environmental management or governance. Now, take a few minutes. I will continue with this video, but you may pause this video and write down a few short examples. Think of the entire universe of INGOs that you know in this space. And if you don't know many, think of the one or two that you know, and feel free to look up stuff on the internet and jot down details. But the idea is to really help you understand both the positives and negatives in terms of their role in management and governance of environment issues globally. So back to the article that, the only article that I required you to read, and I assigned this article simply because it gave a good, I think in my view, a good perspective of the role of NGOs in acting as intermediaries between the state and the global publics at large. Now, we all agree that environment is a commons problem. I introduced the idea of commons a few weeks ago to you, and I'm sure we all agree that environment, clean water, clean air, all these issues are global issues, and they're not, they don't impact nation states. They do not end with borders, but they transcend borders in that sense. So, to that extent, what this author is basically saying is that NGOs and specifically INGOs bring distinctive skills and resources to bear in the case of international cooperation. And Raustiala sees a positive, net positive, in the short run at least, in terms of managing this process, even though there are a few negatives. And the biggest criticism that you can actually come up with, and under the Trump regime in the US and also other states that are hyper nationalistic, they would say, okay, they harm our sovereignty. Who the hell is Greenpeace to tell us how we should conduct our business in our own country? Who are they to tell us to shut down certain, practices in terms of climate, environment management, or even in terms of managing the EPA, for instance. So these are sovereignty issues are at the heart of many of these debates, with each state saying this, what we will do, what is good for us, and not really having this idea of a commons, which is, I think, crucial in understanding these issues. And I think they also mentioned, Raustiala also mentions towards the end about GEF, which is the World Bank's environment facility, which has played an important role in assessing the role of environment activism, as well as the kind of funding that the World Bank does and what impact it has globally. Now, the key argument, as I've already pointed out, is that the influence of the state increases with the role of INGOs. Now, Raustiala suggests that there is a net positive for the state to gain in terms of INGO participation, because the INGOs also increase the legitimacy of the state. both providing good, credible information by acting as intermediaries between the state and also facilitating the dialogue processes between various different organizations, even if it is under the UN framework or outside of it. So there is that expertise, the understanding, and in depth policy knowledge that comes about. Now, in that context, I'm sort of doing a back and forth here. My presentation is not linear in this case, and that's intentional because I also, while you're thinking of these, I want you to think of the critiques of INGOs in this sense, like who gave the NGOs the right to speak on behalf of these people or issues, and how representative are INGOs in the international environment context. So that's something. Keep this at the back of your mind as you think grappling with this paper as well as other related issues. Now, related concept which Raustiala mentions is the whole institutional theory argument, which is quite an important theoretical framework in public administration and international relations. Now, basically, she quotes one important author, Keehan, who has incorporated NGOs and talked about again the technocratic and political role in terms of how they play a role in managing the treaty processes and also the changing role of INGOs. Now remember that INGOs have evolved in their both in their ability as well as their expertise as well as the confidence with which they speak on certain issues. So you can argue that with the rise of the global technology revolution, they've had a huge spur. Also, with cheap travel and a really globalized world, things have become flow of information has become easier, and NGOs have taken advantage of these resources to really push their case and increase their influence. While this is seen as a net positive, one of the criticisms again made is the political affiliation of certain NGOs. And for the most part, international NGOs tend to be progressive, liberal, and advocate an agenda which is aligns with these principles. So that's another issue that comes up, that people who do not agree with these principles tend to resist or tend to push back, saying, "Hey, these guys are biased. They're pushing just one agenda." And I've already mentioned this, the advantages of what the states gain by engaging with INGOs, especially in the space of environment activism or environment management. The last point I haven't spoken about much, but research, of course, is something that the NGOs bring to the table, expertise in terms of policy, but feedback from the communities being impacted. Now, that's something that the state is not able to accomplish on its own all the time. Because remember, getting feedback from people is an expensive proposition. It's not easy to conduct a national level survey or national level or even regional level survey of attitudes or perceptions. So NGOs, by their nature, are connected through, most of them at least, are connected to the constituents that they seek to represent. So they have a better pulse of what's going on in the communities, and hence are able to use that feedback to influence or impact state policy. Now, in terms of access of information and information flow, there was this example mentioned of Earth Negotiations Bulletin, which is again reporting services of the UN framework. And here, when we're talking of access to information, here's a classic and wonderful example of this happening. You might want to check out their website and also their Facebook group for updates, and also follow this through as we go through this whole Paris Climate Accord withdrawal. Now, in terms of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I just wanted you guys to have a rough framework in terms of how do they work and what are their constituent parts. So this is an example I pulled up from their website. So have a look and try to figure out where NGOs, where do you think they work in all the working groups, all the task forces that are there, and what kinds of technical support do they offer? For instance, in the IPCC reports that have come up more recently, try to look up how many NGOs and which NGOs from the US have contributed their expertise, and what is the criterion for their involvement. So treat that as sort of an investigative exercise, and I would encourage you to do that as you move forward. Now, again, I'm also observing this space as much as you are, I assume. So we're trying to really understand how are the INGOs responding to the initiatives of this administration, particularly since this event is so fresh, and I didn't even see too many press releases from organizations. I looked at the Climate Action Network's website just a few minutes ago, and there wasn't anything. I pulled this out from the Greenpeace's network website, and they said something along the lines that you read here. So of course they want the U.S. to be involved, uh, also because the U.S. is a superpower. It has brings a lot of influence and power, as well as expertise. Even at the state level, you could argue they bring a lot of expertise, especially with agencies like the EPA, NASA, and others. So this is a very serious and crucial issue we're dealing with. So please pay attention as we move forward with the developments in this space. That's basically all I have for you. We can talk more in the class, or we can talk individually if you have any questions. But I just pulled up some resources for you guys to look at, and hope you have a good weekend. And I'll see you on Tuesday. Thank you.